My name is Alma Martin, and at 67 years old, I thought my days as a Florida Supreme Court justice were the most dramatic chapters of my life. That changed when a desperate knocking jolted me awake at 1 a.m. I opened my door to find Jessica, my only daughter, collapsing into my arms. Her eye was blackened, her lips split open, blood staining her blouse. Through sobs, she whispered, "Mom, Richard beat me. He chose his mistress over me." I quietly pulled her inside and reached for my old judicial robe. Then I called my lawyer. "Start the plan, now." Before I continue this story, let me know which state you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you believe true justice sometimes requires a mother's love and a judge's wisdom. Jessica had always been my pride and joy. My beautiful, brilliant daughter graduated top of her class from Harvard Law, following my footsteps into the legal profession. She had my determination and her father's kind eyes, though he passed away when she was just 19. I raised her alone after that, watching her blossom into an exceptional young woman who fought for justice in her own way, specializing in nonprofit legal aid. I still remember the day she met Richard Taylor. It was at a charity gala 5 years ago. I was being honored for my 30 years on the bench, and Richard was there representing his investment firm that had sponsored the event. He was undeniably handsome, tall with piercing blue eyes, and a disarming smile that seemed to light up any room. He had the kind of confidence that came from old money and elite education. Princeton undergraduate, Wharton MBA, and a family name that opened doors throughout Florida's business community. Jessica was 32, then focused entirely on her career. She had dated occasionally but never seemed to find someone who matched her intellect and passion. Richard changed that. He pursued her relentlessly, sending flowers to her office, arranging elaborate dates, charming her with his knowledge of art and literature. Even I was impressed by his apparent depth and sophistication. Their wedding was like something from a fairy tale. Richard spared no expense. A beachfront ceremony with 400 guests, Jessica in a designer gown that made her look like royalty. I remember giving a toast, saying how proud I was to welcome Richard into our small but mighty family. How foolish I feel now thinking of those words. At the time, I was still serving on the Florida Supreme Court. My career had been my anchor after losing my husband, and I took great pride in my reputation for fairness and wisdom. I had handled many domestic violence cases during my earlier years as a trial judge, and I believed I could spot the signs. How did I miss them in my own daughter's marriage? The first changes were subtle. About a year into their marriage, Richard expanded his investment firm. Suddenly, he was working later hours, coming home past midnight, distracted when Jessica spoke to him. He became irritable over small things. Dinner not being ready when he wanted it. Jessica spending too much time on her cases. Phone calls interrupting his rare moments at home. Then came the request that should have been my first real warning. Richard suggested that Jessica take a break from her legal career. "Just temporarily," he said. "The firm is expanding, and I need more support at home." Jessica resisted at first, but Richard was persuasive. He talked about starting a family soon, about how her nonprofit work wasn't financially practical, about how much he needed her. Eventually, she gave in. She left the job she loved, the career she had worked so hard to build. Jessica and I had always been close. Weekly lunches, daily phone calls. We were not just mother and daughter, but best friends. After she quit her job, those lunches became monthly, then rare occasions. The calls grew shorter, more perfunctory. When I asked about her happiness, she would answer with rehearsed enthusiasm about charity committees Richard wanted her to join or renovation projects for their waterfront mansion. Looking back, I should have recognized the financial control Richard was establishing. He convinced Jessica to close her personal accounts and merge everything into joint accounts that he primarily managed. He implemented a monthly allowance for her personal expenses. My independent daughter, who once argued cases before the state appellate court, was now asking permission to buy a new dress or donate to causes she cared about. Richard also began to isolate Jessica from her friends. Her law school colleagues were too liberal or bad influences. Her childhood friends were beneath their social standing now. One by one, the connections that had formed her support network fell away until Richard and I were the only constants in her life. And soon he would try to remove me too. As months passed, Jessica became increasingly distant. Our once vibrant conversations turned into short, guarded exchanges. She would cancel our lunch dates at the last minute with vague excuses about Richard needing her for something urgent. When we did meet, she wore clothing that seemed out of character. High-necked blouses in the Florida summer heat, long sleeves even on the most sweltering days, excessive makeup that seemed carefully applied to cover something. I remember one particular evening when I invited them both to dinner at my home. Jessica arrived wearing a silk scarf around her neck, despite the 90-degree temperature outside. Throughout the evening, she kept adjusting it nervously. When she reached for the salt, the scarf shifted, and I caught sight of a dark purple bruise encircling her wrist like a macabre bracelet. "Jessica, what happened to your arm?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. Her eyes darted to Richard before she answered. "Oh, I tripped over one of the renovation cables at the house. Clumsy me." She laughed, but the sound was hollow, rehearsed. Richard immediately jumped in. "The contractors have made such a mess. I keep telling them to clean up better. Speaking of the renovation, Alma, we were thinking of redoing the pool area next. What do you think about infinity edges?" The abrupt change of subject wasn't subtle, but I played along while watching their interaction more carefully. Richard's hand rested on Jessica's thigh under the table, his fingers digging in slightly when she spoke. His charming smile never reached his eyes when he looked at her. As a judge, I had seen hundreds of domestic violence cases. I had heard the excuses, seen the covered bruises, witnessed the controlled interactions between abusers and their victims. I had sentenced men like Richard to jail time, granted restraining orders, tried to protect women who couldn't protect themselves. Now my own daughter was showing the same signs, and I felt utterly helpless. After dinner, I tried to find a moment alone with Jessica while Richard was taking a business call on the patio. "Sweetheart, is everything all right between you two?" I asked gently. Her smile was too bright, too quick. "Of course, Mom. Everything is perfect. Richard works so hard for us. You know you can tell me anything, Jessica. Anything at all." Before she could respond, Richard appeared in the doorway. "Ready to go, darling? I have an early meeting tomorrow." His tone was pleasant, but his stance blocked the doorway, a subtle barrier between my daughter and me. In the following weeks, I tried repeatedly to get Jessica alone. I invited her to lunch, to spa days, even to help me shop for a new dress for a judicial conference. Richard always found a reason why she couldn't come or insisted on joining us. On the rare occasions when I did see Jessica alone, she seemed nervous, checking her phone, constantly worried about getting home on time. My concern growing by the day, I decided to do something that went against all my judicial ethics. I began investigating Richard Taylor. I had colleagues in banking and real estate in the state attorney's office. Quietly, I made calls, asked questions, pulled strings to access information that would normally require warrants. What I discovered was troubling. Richard's investment firm had several clients with questionable backgrounds. There were large cash deposits that seemed to appear from nowhere, property purchases made through shell companies. And there was Lauren Wilson, his executive assistant, who traveled with him on every business trip, who had been given an ownership stake in one of his subsidiary companies, who lived in a luxury condo purchased by one of Richard's business entities. Lauren was 28, ambitious, with degrees in finance and international business. According to my sources, she had been with Richard's firm for 3 years, joining just before he met Jessica. In company photos, she was always at Richard's side, their body language, suggesting an intimacy beyond professional boundaries. In one image from a business retreat, I could see Richard's hand resting on the small of her back, his wedding ring clearly visible. The more I discovered, the more concerned I became. But without Jessica's admission that something was wrong, there was little I could legally do. I was walking a dangerous line, already using my connections to investigate my son-in-law. If Richard discovered my actions, he could file ethics complaints that would threaten my judicial position. But my daughter's safety mattered more than my career. With mounting evidence of Richard's questionable business dealings and possible affair, I took a step I never imagined I would take. I hired Brian Donovan, a private investigator, who had previously worked as a detective in the Miami Police Department. Brian had testified in my courtroom multiple times over the years, and I trusted his discretion and thoroughness. Judge Martin, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Brian questioned when I explained what I wanted. Following your son-in-law could get complicated, especially given your position. I understand the risks, I told him firmly. But something is very wrong in my daughter's marriage. I need proof before I can help her. Brian nodded, his weathered face serious. I'll be careful. He won't know he's being watched. For 3 weeks, Brian followed Richard, documenting his movements with photographs and detailed reports. The evidence confirmed my worst fears. Richard was indeed having an affair with Lauren Wilson. Twice a week they met at the Bayview Hotel downtown, always using separate entrances, but leaving together hours later. Brian provided photographs of them entering and exiting, timestamps, confirming their meetings, even images of them kissing in the hotel bar. Armed with this evidence, I invited Jessica to lunch, insisting it was important. Surprisingly, Richard didn't object. He was planning to be out of town that weekend at a business conference, the same conference where Lauren had booked a room according to Brian's intelligence. Jessica arrived at the restaurant looking exhausted. Dark circles shadowed her eyes despite careful makeup, and she had lost weight since I had last seen her. We ordered, making small talk until our food arrived. Then I reached across the table and took her hand. Jessica, I need to show you something, and it's going to be painful. But I'm showing you because I love you and I'm worried about you. Her face paled. Mom, what are you talking about? I pulled out the envelope containing Brian's photographs and slid them across the table. Richard is having an affair with his assistant Lauren. These were taken over the past 3 weeks. Jessica's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. She flipped through the images slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to pain. Then, to my surprise, anger flashed in her eyes, not at Richard but at me. You had him followed. How could you do that? She hissed, shoving the photos back into the envelope. You had no right to invade our privacy. Jessica, I'm concerned about you. The bruises, the isolation, the way he controls you, these are warning signs. And now this affair. There are no warning signs because there's nothing wrong, she snapped, her voice rising. Richard works hard under tremendous pressure. Sometimes he gets frustrated, but he loves me. These photos, they're probably just business meetings. Lauren is his assistant, for God's sake. Business meetings in hotel rooms. Jessica, please. You're a lawyer. Look at the evidence objectively. The evidence you obtained by spying on my husband, that's rich, coming from a Supreme Court justice. Does the Bar Association know you're hiring private investigators to stalk family members? Her words stung, but I pressed on. I'm not speaking to you as a judge right now. I'm speaking as your mother who loves you and sees you suffering. The only thing making me suffer right now is you, Jessica said, coldly gathering her purse. Stay out of my marriage, Mom. I mean it. She stormed out of the restaurant, leaving me sitting alone with an untouched meal and a heart full of fear. That was the last time I would see my daughter for nearly 2 months. After our confrontation, Jessica stopped taking my calls completely. When I went to their house, the housekeeper informed me that Mrs. Taylor wasn't available. I sent emails, letters, even tried reaching out through mutual friends. Nothing. Richard had successfully cut the last tie to Jessica's former life. Me. Through Brian, I learned that Richard had been furious about our lunch meeting. Neighbors reported hearing shouting from their home that evening. The next day, Jessica had canceled all her social engagements and charity committee meetings. She had effectively disappeared from public view. I was desperate enough to consider filing a missing person report, but I knew it would go nowhere. Jessica was an adult who had technically chosen to cut contact with me. Without evidence of a crime, the police would not intervene. Instead, I reached out to an old colleague, James Peterson, who was still serving as a circuit court judge. James and I had worked together for decades, and he understood the seriousness of the situation when I explained my concerns. If she comes to you with any evidence of abuse, bring her straight to me, James promised. Day or night, I'll issue an emergency protective order. But Alma, you know as well as I do that we can't force help on someone who isn't asking for it. I spent many sleepless nights staring at my phone, willing it to ring with Jessica's number. I imagined her locked in that mansion, possibly injured, certainly controlled. The powerlessness was overwhelming. I, who had spent a career delivering justice, was unable to help my own child. During this time, I began developing what I called Operation Immediate Justice with my attorney Margaret Foster. Margaret had been my clerk early in her career and had become a formidable family law attorney. Together, we prepared documentation for every possible scenario: domestic violence charges, emergency restraining orders, divorce filings, financial disclosures, even criminal complaints related to Richard's business dealings. We need to be ready the moment Jessica asks for help, I told Margaret. There won't be time to prepare documents then. We'll be ready, Margaret assured me. Richard Taylor won't know what hit him. Little did we know how soon we would put this plan into action. The pounding on my front door at 1 a.m. was frantic, desperate. I had fallen asleep in my reading chair, a case file open on my lap. Even in retirement, I consulted on complex constitutional matters. The sudden noise startled me awake, my heart pounding with alarm. When I opened the door, the sight before me would be forever burned into my memory. Jessica stood swaying on my doorstep, barely able to remain upright. Her left eye was swollen shut, a grotesque purple-black balloon where her delicate features should have been. Blood trickled from a split in her lower lip, dripping onto her torn blouse. Her cheek bore the distinct imprint of a hand, 5 fingers clearly outlined in angry red against her pale skin. "Mom," she whispered, her voice ragged. "He found out about the lunch. The pictures. He said I was spying on him with you." Her words slurred slightly from her swollen lip. I pulled her gently inside my judicial training, temporarily overriding my maternal horror. "You're safe now," I said, softly guiding her to the sofa. "Let me look at you." Under the living room lights, her injuries were even more apparent. Besides the obvious facial trauma, there were finger-shaped bruises on her throat, defensive wounds on her forearms, and when she winced as she sat, I suspected injuries hidden beneath her clothing. "I need to take you to the hospital," I said firmly. No fear flashed in her one open eye. "He'll find me there," he said he would. "Jessica, I need you to tell me exactly what happened tonight," I interrupted, taking her hands carefully in mine. Every detail. Through sobs and painful breaths, Jessica told her story. She had discovered text messages on Richard's phone while he was showering. Explicit exchanges with Lauren about their relationship and their plans to be together. "I confronted him," Jessica said, her voice small. "I was calm at first. I just asked him if he was having an affair. He denied it, got angry that I had looked at his phone. But then another message came in from her while we were arguing. It said she couldn't wait to feel him inside her again tomorrow." Jessica's voice broke, and I handed her a tissue, fighting to maintain my composure as rage built inside me. When I showed him the message, he just changed. His face became so cold. He said Lauren understood him, appreciated his ambition, that she was helping his career while I was just spending his money. When I said I wanted a divorce, he laughed. He said I had signed an ironclad prenup, that I would get nothing because I had no proof of anything. Her breathing quickened as she continued. He said I was worthless without him, that no law firm would hire me after 5 years away from practice. Then I told him I knew about the photos from our lunch, that you had evidence of his affair. That's when he hit me the first time. My stomach clenched at her words. The first time, not the only time. He just kept hitting me, saying I had betrayed him by conspiring with you, that I was ungrateful for everything he had given me. He grabbed my throat. Her fingers traced the bruises on her neck. I thought he might kill me. When he finally stopped, he said if I tried to leave him, he would destroy me. Destroy both of us. That he had friends in the bar association who would have your judicial pension revoked for ethics violations. That he would claim I was mentally unstable, addicted to prescription drugs. She looked up at me with her one good eye, tears streaming down her face. But when he went to take a shower, I grabbed my purse and car keys and just ran. I only had $40 in cash and my driver's license. He keeps all our credit cards. I drove straight here. My decision was immediate. We're going to the emergency room, and then we're implementing the plan. What plan? Jessica asked, confusion evident through her pain. Justice, I replied, simply standing up. I walked to my closet and removed my judicial robe, the symbol of authority I had worn for 3 decades. But first, medical documentation of your injuries. At Gulf Coast Memorial Hospital, Dr. Sarah Thompson examined Jessica thoroughly. An emergency room physician with 20 years of experience, Dr. Thompson had testified in many domestic violence cases in my courtroom over the years. She recognized me immediately. Judge Martin, she nodded gravely, as she documented Jessica's injuries with clinical precision. These injuries are consistent with a severe assault. Multiple contusions at different stages of healing suggest this isn't the first incident. Jessica avoided my gaze as Dr. Thompson continued her assessment. Bruising around the throat indicates attempted strangulation, which is a high risk factor for future homicide in domestic violence cases. I'm also concerned about possible rib fractures and internal bleeding. X-rays confirmed 2 cracked ribs. Jessica winced as Dr. Thompson applied butterfly bandages to her split lip and prescribed pain medication and anti-inflammatory drugs. Jessica, Dr. Thompson said gently, "These older bruises on your back and arms, they're from previous assaults, aren't they?" After a long moment, Jessica nodded. "It started about a year ago. Just grabbing at first, leaving finger bruises, then pushing, slapping. Tonight was the worst." My heart shattered hearing these words. For a year, my daughter had been suffering in silence, while I suspected but failed to intervene effectively. "He said it was my fault," Jessica whispered, "that I provoked him by questioning his decisions or not being supportive enough. After a while, I started to believe him." Dr. Thompson placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder. "That's what abusers do. They make you doubt yourself, your perceptions. None of this is your fault." As Dr. Thompson filed the mandatory domestic violence report with the police department, I stepped into the hallway and made 2 critical phone calls. The first was to Margaret Foster. "It's time," I said when she answered despite the late hour. "Jessica is with me. Richard assaulted her severely. We're at Gulf Coast Memorial." "I'm on my way," Margaret replied without hesitation. "I'll bring the emergency protective order documents we prepared. Are you activating the full plan?" "Every phase," I confirmed. "And Margaret, bring the financial disclosure subpoenas too. We're going to take everything from him." The second call was to Brian Donovan. "Brian, I need all the evidence you've gathered on Richard Taylor, both personal and professional. Jessica is ready to press charges." "Judge Martin, I've been building that file for weeks, hoping this day wouldn't come, but prepared if it did. I'll be there within the hour." As I ended the call, I turned to find Jessica standing in the doorway, her medical forms clutched in her trembling hand. "Mom," she said, her voice stronger than it had been all night. "I'm scared. Richard said he would destroy me if I left. What if he does?" I took my daughter's hands in mine, careful of her injuries. "Jessica, do you remember what I told you when you argued your first case in court?" A ghost of a smile touched her damaged lips. "You said that justice isn't just about the law, it's about standing firm in the truth." "Exactly. Richard has power, money, and connections. But we have something stronger, the truth. And I promise you the truth will win." Back at my home, I changed into my formal judicial robe. Not because I was acting in an official capacity, but because I needed to feel the weight of it around my shoulders, the reminder of the power and responsibility I had carried for decades. This wasn't just about comfort now, it was about strategy. Jessica sat at my kitchen table holding an ice pack to her face while I made calls. Margaret arrived first, bringing with her a portfolio of legal documents we had prepared over the past months. She embraced Jessica, gently mindful of her injuries. "I always hoped we wouldn't need these," Margaret said, opening the portfolio. "But we're going to make sure you're protected, Jessica." Inside were emergency restraining order applications, divorce filings with specific provisions for domestic violence situations, financial disclosure demands, and motions for exclusive use of the marital home. Margaret had prepared everything meticulously anticipating Richard's likely countermoves. "First, we file for the emergency protective order," Margaret explained. "Judge Peterson is expecting our call. He's agreed to issue the order remotely given the circumstances." Brian Donovan arrived shortly after carrying a thick file folder and an external hard drive. The former detective's expression was grave as he took in Jessica's injuries. "I have everything documented," he said, placing the materials on the table. "The affair with Lauren Wilson, including hotel receipts, photographs, and witness statements from hotel staff. But more importantly, I've uncovered significant irregularities in Richard's business dealings." Brian opened his laptop and showed us spreadsheets, banking records, and corporate filings. Richard has been moving money through a network of shell companies. Some of the funds appear to be coming from clients with connections to offshore gambling operations. There's evidence of possible money laundering, tax evasion, and securities fraud. "How did you get access to these records?" I asked, concerned about ensuring all evidence would be admissible. "All through legal channels," Brian assured me. "I have contacts in financial crimes who have been monitoring these activities independently. They were more than willing to share information when I mentioned your name, Judge Martin. They remember your reputation for fairness in white-collar cases." Margaret reviewed the financial documents carefully. "This changes our strategy. We can use this information to freeze assets, immediately preventing Richard from hiding money during divorce proceedings." While they worked, I called Judge James Peterson at his home. Despite the late hour, he answered immediately. "James, it's Alma. The situation with Jessica has escalated. She's with me now, severely beaten by Richard. We need that emergency protective order we discussed." "I've been waiting for your call, hoping it wouldn't come," James replied soberly. "Is she willing to make a statement?" "Yes. We have medical documentation, photographs, and her sworn statement." "Get the paperwork to me within the hour. I'll sign the order immediately. And Alma, I'll make sure it's airtight. No judge in this circuit will overturn it." Within 30 minutes, a police officer arrived at my home to take Jessica's formal statement. Officer Ramirez was compassionate but thorough, photographing Jessica's injuries and recording her account of the assault. "Mrs. Taylor, based on your statement and these injuries, we have probable cause to arrest your husband for felony domestic battery and attempted strangulation," Officer Ramirez explained. "Do you want us to proceed with the arrest tonight?" Jessica looked at me, uncertainty in her eyes. I nodded, encouragingly. "Yes," she said firmly. "I want him arrested." As Officer Ramirez radioed for patrol units to proceed to Richard's address, my phone rang. Richard's name flashed on the screen. I put it on speaker. "You think you're clever," Alma Richards' voice was cold, controlled. "Having Jessica spy on me, hiring investigators. You've always thought you were better than me with your judicial robes and your moral superiority." "Richard, I'm recording this call," I stated calmly. "Anything you say can be used as evidence." He laughed harshly. "Evidence of what? That my mother-in-law is interfering in my marriage. That my wife is emotionally unstable and prone to fabricating stories when she doesn't get her way. Jessica has no proof of anything, and neither do you. We have photographs of Jessica's injuries, medical documentation, and now this phone call demonstrating your threatening behavior," I replied evenly. "Jessica is my wife. What happens between us is private. As for her injuries, who's to say she didn't cause them herself? She's been increasingly erratic lately, talking about hearing voices. I've been consulting with psychiatrists about having her committed for her own safety." I saw Jessica flinch at his words, the calculated cruelty designed to make her doubt herself. Margaret squeezed her hand supportively. "Richard, patrol units are on their way to arrest you right now for felony domestic battery," I informed him. "Judge Peterson has signed an emergency protective order prohibiting you from any contact with Jessica." There was a moment of silence before Richard's voice turned venomous. "You've made a serious mistake, Alma. I have friends in places you can't imagine. By the time I'm done, your precious judicial pension will be gone, and Jessica will be lucky if she gets $1 in the divorce. You think you know everything about me. You have no idea what I'm capable of." Actually, we do, I replied, nodding to Brian, who held up the financial documents. We know about the money laundering through your Cayman Islands accounts. We know about the real estate investments purchased with unaccounted for cash. The Securities and Exchange Commission will be very interested in our findings. Another silence, longer this time. When Richard spoke again, his voice had lost its confidence. You're bluffing. You have nothing. Would you like me to read the account numbers? Or perhaps detail the meetings you had with Anthony Vincenzo last month, a man currently under federal investigation for racketeering? You bitch, Richard hissed. You'll regret this. Both of you will. That's another threat on record, Richard. I suggest you contact your attorney immediately. You're going to need one. Actually, several. Criminal defense for the domestic violence charges another for the financial crimes and a divorce attorney, though I doubt even the best can help you keep your assets after what you've done. The line went dead. Minutes later, Officer Ramirez received confirmation that Richard had been taken into custody without incident. As the night progressed into early morning, we continued building our legal fortress. Margaret filed the divorce papers electronically, including motions to freeze all marital assets and Richard's business accounts pending investigation. Brian compiled his evidence for delivery to the state attorney's office and the SEC. By dawn, exhausted, but determined, we had set in motion a legal avalanche that would bury Richard Taylor. Jessica, despite her physical pain, seemed to grow stronger with each passing hour, her lawyer's mind engaging with the strategy, contributing insights into Richard's business dealings that even Brian hadn't uncovered. As the first light of day streamed through my windows, Jessica looked up from the documents she was reviewing. He really thought he would get away with it all, didn't he? The abuse, the affair, the financial crimes. Men like Richard always do, I replied, pouring us both fresh coffee. They believe their money and connections make them untouchable. Jessica's undamaged eye held a spark I hadn't seen in years. Then they've never faced a mother-daughter team of judges and lawyers. For the first time since she had appeared on my doorstep, I allowed myself to smile. My daughter was still in there, battered but unbroken, ready to fight back. The following weeks unfolded like a complex chess match, with Richard making increasingly desperate moves as we systematically dismantled his defenses. He was released on bail the morning after his arrest, but the protective order prevented him from returning to the marital home or contacting Jessica. Instead, he took up residence at the Bayview Hotel. Ironically, the same hotel where he had conducted his affair with Lauren Wilson. Richard hired Michael Blackwood, a prominent defense attorney known for representing wealthy clients in high-profile cases. Blackwood was skilled, ruthless, and expensive, charging over $800 per hour. His first move was to attempt to have the protective order dismissed, claiming Jessica's injuries were self-inflicted during a mental health episode. Judge Peterson saw through this immediately. Mr. Blackwood, the medical evidence directly contradicts your client's claims. The protective order stands, and I'm extending it for 6 months, pending the outcome of the criminal case. Our next confrontation came during the preliminary hearing for the domestic violence charges. The state attorney's office had assigned prosecutor Elena Vasquez to the case, a former student of mine who specialized in domestic violence cases. With Jessica's medical records, photographs, and the recorded phone threats, Elena built a compelling case for felony charges. Richard sat at the defense table, immaculately dressed in an expensive suit, his expression one of injured innocence. When Jessica entered the courtroom, he attempted to make eye contact, trying to intimidate her with the stare that had preceded so many violent episodes. But Jessica, with Margaret and me flanking her, kept her eyes forward, her posture straight despite the lingering pain from her injuries. Blackwood's strategy quickly became clear: attack Jessica's credibility and mental stability. He introduced affidavits from Richard's friends, claiming they had witnessed Jessica exhibiting erratic behavior at social events. He submitted statements from Richard's personal physician, suggesting Jessica had been seeking prescription pain medications. Your Honor, Blackwood argued smoothly, Mrs. Taylor has been struggling with emotional instability for some time. My client has been trying to get her help, but she has resisted treatment. These alleged injuries occurred during a self-harm episode when Mr. Taylor attempted to prevent his wife from hurting herself. Elena Vasquez approached the bench with Dr. Thompson's complete medical report. Your Honor, the pattern and distribution of Mrs. Taylor's injuries are inconsistent with self-harm and entirely consistent with an assault. Dr. Thompson, who has extensive experience documenting domestic violence injuries, will testify to this fact. Dr. Thompson's testimony was clinical and devastating. She walked the court through each of Jessica's injuries, explaining how the bruising patterns matched an external assault rather than self-inflicted wounds. She presented photographs showing older injuries in various stages of healing, indicating a pattern of abuse over time. In my professional opinion, Dr. Thompson concluded Mrs. Taylor's injuries are consistent with repeated physical abuse culminating in a severe assault involving strangulation. The strangulation attempt is particularly concerning, as it is highly correlated with future homicide in domestic violence cases. Richard's face remained impassive, but I could see a muscle twitching in his jaw, a tell I had observed in countless defendants when damaging testimony was presented. Brian Donovan testified next, presenting the evidence of Richard's affair with Lauren Wilson. While infidelity itself wasn't criminal, it established motive for the assault. Jessica had confronted Richard about the affair immediately before he attacked her. When Jessica took the stand, I held my breath. This would be the most difficult part of the process, reliving the trauma while being subjected to Blackwood's aggressive cross-examination. But my daughter surprised me with her composure. She told her story clearly and completely, describing not just the final assault but the pattern of escalating abuse. It began with control, Jessica explained. Financial control, isolating me from friends and family, monitoring my movements. The physical abuse started gradually, grabbing my arm too hard, pushing me during arguments. Over time, it escalated to slapping, punching, and eventually, the night I came to my mother's home, attempted strangulation. Blackwood's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned why Jessica hadn't reported the abuse earlier, suggested she was manufacturing claims to gain advantage in the upcoming divorce, even implied she was having an affair of her own, and Richard had reacted in justified anger. Throughout the questioning, Jessica remained steady. I didn't report the abuse because I was ashamed and afraid. Richard convinced me that no one would believe me, that he had too much power and influence to be held accountable. I believed him until I realized he might actually kill me. Just as the hearing seemed to be winding down, the courtroom doors opened and Lauren Wilson walked in. Her appearance caused an immediate stir. Richard half rose from his seat before Blackwood pulled him back down, whispering urgently. Lauren approached the prosecutor, handed her a document, and asked to speak to the judge. After a brief sidebar conversation, Judge Peterson allowed Lauren to testify. I was involved in a relationship with Richard Taylor for approximately 2 years, Lauren stated, her voice shaking slightly. During that time, I witnessed him become violent on several occasions. He never struck me in the face. He said he was too smart for that, but he would grab me, shake me, and leave bruises in places that wouldn't show in business attire. Lauren rolled up her sleeve to reveal a bruise on her upper arm. This happened 3 days ago when I told Richard I wanted to end our relationship after learning about what he did to Jessica. He said if I testified against him, he would make sure I never worked in finance again. Richard's face had gone from confident to ashen. His carefully constructed defense was crumbling as Lauren detailed his threats, his violence, and his plans to discredit Jessica as mentally unstable. By the end of the hearing, Judge Peterson found probable cause to proceed with felony charges of domestic battery, aggravated battery, and attempted strangulation. Richard's bail was revoked based on the new evidence that he had recently assaulted Lauren, demonstrating an ongoing danger to others. As Richard was led away in handcuffs, he turned to glare at me. "This isn't over," he mouthed silently. I simply nodded in agreement. He was right about one thing. It wasn't over. The criminal case was just the beginning. The divorce proceedings and financial investigations were still to come, and we were prepared for each phase. Within days of the criminal hearing, the Securities and Exchange Commission launched a formal investigation into Richard's business dealings based on the evidence Brian had provided. The IRS Criminal Investigation Division followed suit, focusing on potential tax evasion and money laundering charges. Richard's carefully constructed empire began to collapse under scrutiny. Clients withdrew their investments, business partners distanced themselves, and the exclusive social circles that had once welcomed him now closed their doors. The man who had threatened to destroy Jessica found himself facing years in prison and financial ruin. 3 months after that terrible night when Jessica appeared on my doorstep, Richard Taylor was convicted on multiple counts of domestic violence and financial crimes. The judge, a colleague I had known for 20 years but who had no direct connection to me that might suggest bias, sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison. As we left the courthouse after sentencing, Jessica turned to me with tears in her eyes. "It's really over, isn't it? He can't hurt me anymore." I put my arm around my daughter's shoulders. "Yes, sweetheart. It's over. And you're free." Recovery is rarely a straight line, especially from wounds that go deeper than skin. While Jessica's physical injuries healed within weeks, the emotional trauma took much longer to address. At my suggestion, she began seeing Dr. Ellen Martinez, a psychologist, specializing in trauma and domestic abuse recovery. "Healing will take time," Ellen explained during a joint session I attended with Jessica. "What you experienced was not just physical violence, but emotional and psychological abuse designed to break down your sense of self. Rebuilding that takes patience and consistent work." Jessica approached her recovery with the same determination she had once brought to her legal career. Twice-weekly therapy sessions, support groups with other survivors, journaling to process her emotions. She committed fully to her healing journey. There were difficult days, of course. Nightmares that left her gasping for breath, panic attacks triggered by unexpected sounds, moments of self-doubt when Richard's cruel words echoed in her mind. During those times, I was there, offering the unconditional support I wished I had provided sooner. Our relationship deepened through this shared experience. The walls that Richard had built between us crumbled as we spoke honestly about the past. Jessica admitted she had been too ashamed to tell me about the abuse, fearing I would see her as weak or foolish. "I was a lawyer, Mom," she confessed, during one late-night conversation. "I prosecuted domestic violence cases before I met Richard. How could I not recognize what was happening in my own marriage?" "Because abusers like Richard are expert manipulators," I reminded her. "They isolate you, gradually undermine your confidence, so slowly you don't notice until you're trapped. Your legal training couldn't protect you from a calculated predator who knew exactly how to exploit your vulnerabilities." 6 months after Richard's conviction, Jessica made a decision that surprised me. She wanted to return to legal practice, but not to her previous field. Instead, she applied for a position with the Domestic Violence Legal Advocacy Center, a nonprofit organization providing free legal representation to abused survivors. "I understand now what these women are going through in a way I never could before," she explained. "I can use my experience to help them find their way out, just like you helped me." The director of the center, Victoria Menendez, recognized the unique perspective Jessica brought to the role. "Your combination of legal expertise and personal experience makes you invaluable to our clients," Victoria told her during the interview. "They'll know you truly understand their situation." Jessica threw herself into her new position with passion and purpose. She represented women in court, helped them navigate the complex legal system, and advocated for stronger domestic violence laws at the state level. Within a year, she had helped more than 50 women escape abusive relationships and rebuild their lives. Using a portion of the divorce settlement, Jessica established the Freedom Journey Foundation, providing financial assistance to abuse survivors who needed help with relocation, education, or starting new businesses. The foundation partnered with local businesses to create job opportunities specifically for women leaving abusive situations. "Economic independence is crucial for survivors," Jessica explained during a fundraising event. "Many women stay in dangerous relationships because they have no financial means to leave. Our foundation aims to remove that barrier." Watching my daughter transform her trauma into powerful advocacy filled me with immense pride. The Jessica who had once been diminished by Richard's control now stood tall, her voice strong as she spoke to lawmakers, judges, and community leaders about the realities of domestic violence. About a year after the foundation launched, Jessica met Thomas Wilson at a mental health conference where they were both speaking. Thomas was a clinical psychologist who worked with trauma survivors, and he immediately recognized the passion and authenticity in Jessica's presentation. Their relationship developed slowly, with Jessica understandably cautious about trusting again. Thomas was patient and respectful, always asking permission before physical contact, always validating her feelings and boundaries. He understood the lingering effects of trauma and never took her moments of fear or withdrawal personally. "He's different," Mom Jessica told me, after they had been dating for several months. "He doesn't try to control or change me. He supports my work even when it means late nights or emotional strain. He's proud of me just as I am." Seeing my daughter find healthy love after such devastation brought me a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. The storm had passed, and though it had left scars, Jessica had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. On the second anniversary of her escape from Richard, Jessica and I sat on my porch swing watching the sunset over the bay. The golden light softened the last faint traces of her physical scars, now barely visible unless you knew where to look. "I've been thinking about something you said that night," Jessica mused, her voice contemplative. "About justice being more than just the law. I didn't fully understand it then, but I do now." "And what do you understand?" I asked, curious about her perspective. "True justice isn't just about punishment for wrongdoing. It's about restoration, helping the wounded heal, giving voice to the silenced, and creating something meaningful from pain." She turned to me, her eyes clear and bright. "That's what we've done, isn't it? We've reclaimed power that Richard tried to take from us, and we've used it to help others." I nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "That's exactly what justice should be. Not revenge, but restoration. Not just ending something harmful, but creating something healing in its place." As we sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to deep purple, I reflected on the journey we had traveled. From that terrifying night when Jessica appeared broken on my doorstep to this moment of peaceful companionship, we had confronted darkness and emerged into light. The lesson I carry with me, the wisdom I share with the women who come to Jessica's foundation seeking help, is this: true strength isn't found in enduring abuse silently. It's found in the courage to say enough to reach for help when you need it most, to rebuild what was broken. Justice isn't just what happens in a courtroom. It's what we create when we refuse to let fear and shame silence us, when we stand in our truth despite those who try to deny it. No one deserves to be imprisoned by fear in their own home. Freedom begins with that first brave step toward the door toward a different life. My daughter took that step on a dark night 2 years ago, and though the path since then hasn't always been easy, each step has led her closer to becoming the powerful, compassionate woman she was always meant to be. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself or someone you love against seemingly overwhelming odds? What gave you the strength to take that first step? Share your story in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Your story might be the encouragement someone else needs to find their own path to freedom. Thank you for listening, and remember, true strength often emerges in our most vulnerable moments.